everybody has the source sheet pulled up, hopefully. Um, kind of going off of that. So first, I am lightly tying into this week's Parsha's Yitro, and so part that I'm highlighting is Moshe talking to Yitro, his father-in-law, and he's explaining how he acts as the judiciary, that he's saying when they have a dispute, the Bnei Israel has a dispute, it comes before me and I decide between one person and another, and I make known the laws and teachings of God. But Moshe's father-in-law said to him, the thing you are doing is not right. You will surely wear yourself out, and these people as well, for the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. And then, so I'm just trying to say here, Yitro's partially saying, judging people is exhausting. You don't want to do it if you don't have to. And Pirkei Avot goes on to talk about how you should judge all men with the scale weighted in his favor, which Rashi goes on to say means that on everything that you hear about a person, say that they intended for good until you know with certainty that is not so. So I just want you to keep that in mind while I go on to the next part of this Mishmar, talking about some halacha. That first, talking about kashrut, specifically waiting after you eat meat, that this whole idea comes from as part of Kulin, where Mar Ukva said that essentially that his practice is inferior to his father's. If his father eats meat, he's going to wait all the way until the next day to eat dairy, but Mar Ukva himself just has meat at one meal, and then on a different meal he has dairy. So then, from the esteemed OU Kosher blog, I took an excerpt that's essentially talking about how, so all of these poskim have to say, okay, well, then what's the actual halacha? Is it because it's based on Mar Ukva saying that he waits until the next meal. Is he talking about that you just have to separate the meals, or is he talking about a specific amount of time between the meals? And so we have some debate in the Talmud that there's a part that unfortunately there's not a translation for, but Rabbeinu Tam and Tosafot is saying you don't need to wait between meat and milk. You just need to wash out your mouth and wash your hands. And the part that is translated in Tosafot is summed up as that you don't need to wait between meals. You can just transition immediately as long as you clear off the table and make a bracha. But after that was published, we've got Rambam coming in with that you should wait about 6 hours because you can't really get all this meat out of your teeth, between your teeth, so you should wait about 6 hours. And that becomes the normative halacha of today, even though where if you're Sephardi, it's like pretty typically 6 hours, but for Ashkenazim, it varies greatly, that it could be 1 hour for Dutch Jews or 3 hours for German Jews, or usually 5 to 6 hours for the mainstream Ashkenaz. And so I wanted to lay out that example of something where most people follow the stringency, but it's changed over time. Now I want to get to a different example where a lot of people do the lenient thing, and that's in Suda Shlishi. So if you want to know all about Suda Shlishi, I've got the whole chapter of the Shulchan Aruch on it, but the part that I want to highlight is that it's saying for Suda Shlishi, you've got to have 2 loaves of bread. And that but there's some people who say 1 loaf is enough, but you've got the Ramah saying some people say 1 loaf is enough, but you can be stringent and have 2. But then the Shulchan Aruch is going on to say that some people just do mezonot, and then some people just have some either fish, or some people just have fruit, but the halacha is have bread. If it's possible, have bread. But the thing about that is that a lot of people don't have bread, and nobody's going around saying, hey, they're not actually doing Seudah Shlishit if they aren't having bread. They're viewed as perfectly fine if they're having some crackers and some gefilte fish or something. It's totally fine. So, and then lastly, if my Safari will load, there we go. Wanted to get to this last concept of halacha vein Maureen Kane is saying halacha that there isn't a public, that isn't issued publicly, which highly recommends, don't think I have time for, but highly recommend. There's a great story on Safari about this concept with an alleyway. Would be happy to discuss. But the example that I want to discuss today is that there's this story in Menachot that you've got Rav Ashi where it's getting dark and he puts on tefillin. And the public thing is that if you're trying to keep your tefillin safe, then you can put them on at night, but otherwise don't really want to do that. But you've got Rav Ashi putting them on, and it turns out that it's okay to have tefillin on at night, but that's not a public halakha, which the Shulchan Aruch goes on to say is the rule is that you can put on tefillin, or you shouldn't put on tefillin at night because you might forget about them. But if you have tefillin on at mincha and then it gets dark, then it's okay to put them on. But we don't want to talk to people about that because we don't want people to get the wrong idea of that they can put them on at night under normal circumstances. So all that to say that knowing more about how halakha develops helps us be understanding of others' observances, whether someone is practicing a leniency that isn't mainstream or a stringency that isn't mainstream, or a halakha that is literally not supposed to be public. But whatever happens, it's always wise to not judge people for their practice of Judaism, kind of like I was saying at the top. Just like we wouldn't judge Rabbeinu Tam for not waiting after meat, or just like we wouldn't judge someone for not eating bread at Seudah Shlishit, and to assume that they have a reason they practice how they do. In my experience, this community is always at its best. It's most welcoming when we are our least judgmental selves. Thank you.